Section 11 of Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Matthew Westra. Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. The Funeral Fire. For several nights after the interment of a Chippewa, a fire is kept burning upon the grave. This fire is lit in the evening and carefully supplied with small sticks of dry wood to keep up a bright but small fire. It is kept burning for several hours, generally until the usual hour of retiring to rest, and then suffered to go out. The fire is renewed for 4 nights, and sometimes for longer. The person who performs this pious office is generally a near relative of the deceased, or one who has been long intimate with him. The following tale is related as showing the origin of the custom. A small war party of Chippewas encountered their enemies upon an open plain where a severe battle was fought. Their leader was a brave and distinguished warrior, but he never acted with greater bravery or more distinguished himself by personal prowess than on this occasion. After turning the tide of battle against his enemies while shouting for victory, he received an arrow in his breast and fell upon the plain. No warrior thus killed is ever buried, and according to ancient custom, the chief was placed in a sitting posture upon the field, his back supported by a tree, and his face turned toward the direction in which his enemies had fled. His headdress and equipment were accurately adjusted as if he were living, and his bow leaned against his shoulder. In this posture, his companions left him. That he was dead appeared evident to all, but a strange thing had happened. Although deprived of speech and motion, the chief heard distinctly all that was said by his friends. He heard them lament his death without having the power to contradict it, and he felt their touch as they adjusted his posture without having the power to reciprocate it. His anguish when he felt himself thus abandoned was extreme, and his wish to follow his friends on their return home so completely filled his mind, as he saw them one after another take leave of him and depart, that with a terrible effort he rose and followed them. His form, however, was invisible to them, and this aroused in him surprise, disappointment, and rage, which by turns took possession of him. He followed their track, however, with great diligence. Wherever they went, he went. When they walked, he walked, and when they ran, he ran. When they encamped, he stopped with them. When they slept, he slept. When they awoke, he awoke. In short, he mingled in all their labors and toils, but he was excluded from all their sources of refreshment except that of sleeping, and from the pleasures of participating in their conversation, for all that he said received no notice. "Is it possible," he cried, "that you do not see me, that you do not hear me, that you do not understand me? Will you suffer me to bleed to death without offering to staunch my wounds? Will you permit me to starve while you eat around me? Have those whom I have so often led to war so soon forgotten me? Is there no one who recollects me, or who will offer me a morsel of food in my distress?" Thus he continued to upbraid his friends at every stage of the journey, but no one seemed to hear his words. If his voice was heard at all, it was mistaken for the rustling of the leaves in the wind. At length the returning party reached their village, and their women and children came out, according to custom, to welcome their return and proclaim their praises. "Kumajiwug, Kumajiwug, Kumajiwug, they have met, fought, and conquered," was shouted by every mouth, and the words resounded through the most distant parts of the village. Those who had lost friends came eagerly to inquire their fate and to know whether they had died like men. The aged father consoled himself for the loss of his son with the reflection that he had fallen manfully, and the widow half forgot her sorrow amid the praises that were uttered of the bravery of her husband. The hearts of the youth glowed with martial ardor as they heard these flattering praises, and the children joined in the shouts of which they scarcely knew the meaning. Amidst all this uproar and bustle, no one seemed conscious of the presence of the warrior chief. He heard many inquiries made respecting his fate. He heard his companions tell how he had fought, conquered, and fallen, pierced by an arrow through his breast, and how he had been left behind among the slain on the field of battle. "It is not true," declared the angry chief, "that I was killed and left upon the field. I am here. I live. I move. See me? Touch me. I shall again raise my spear in battle and take my place in the feast." Nobody, however, seemed conscious of his presence, and his voice was mistaken for the whispering of the wind. He now walked to his own lodge, and there he found his wife tearing her hair and lamenting over his fate. He endeavored to undeceive her, but she, like the others, appeared to be insensible of his presence and not to hear his voice. She sat in a despairing manner, with her head reclining on her hands. The chief asked her to bind up his wounds, but she made no reply. He placed his mouth close to her ear and shouted, "I am hungry. Give me some food." The wife thought she heard a buzzing in her ear, and remarked it to one who sat by. The enraged husband, now summoning all his strength, struck her a blow on the forehead. His wife raised her hand to her head and said to her friend, "I feel a slight shooting pain in my head." Foiled thus in every attempt to make himself known, the warrior chief began to reflect upon what he had heard in his youth, to the effect that the spirit was sometimes permitted to leave the body and wander about. He concluded that possibly his body might have remained upon the field of battle, while his spirit only accompanied his returning friends. He determined to return to the field, although it was 4 days' journey away. He accordingly set out upon his way. For 3 days he pursued his way without meeting anything uncommon, but on the 4th, towards evening, as he came to the skirts of the battlefield, he saw a fire in the path before him. He walked to one side to avoid stepping into it, but the fire also changed its position and was still before him. He then went in another direction, but the mysterious fire still crossed his path and seemed to bar his entrance to the scene of the conflict. In short, whichever way he took, the fire was still before him. No expedient seemed to avail him. "Thou demon!" he exclaimed at length, "why dost thou bar my approach to the field of battle? Knowest thou not that I am a spirit also, and that I seek again to enter my body? Dost thou presume that I shall return without effecting my object? Know that I have never been defeated by the enemies of my nation, and will not be defeated by thee." So saying, he made a sudden effort and jumped through the flame. No sooner had he done so than he found himself sitting on the ground, with his back supported by a tree, his bow leaning against his shoulder, all his warlike dress and arms upon his body, just as they had been left by his friends on the day of battle. Looking up, he beheld a large canacu, or war eagle, sitting in the tree above his head. He immediately recognized this bird to be the same as he had once dreamt of in his youth, the one he had chosen as his guardian spirit or personal manito. The eagle had carefully watched his body and prevented other ravenous birds from touching it. The chief got up and stood upon his feet, but he felt himself weak and much exhausted. The blood upon his wound had staunched itself, and he now bound it up. He possessed a knowledge of such roots as have healing properties, and these he carefully sought in the woods. Having found some, he pounded some of them between stones and applied them externally. Others he chewed and swallowed. In a short time he found himself so much recovered as to be able to commence his journey, but he suffered greatly from hunger, not seeing any large animals that he might kill. However, he succeeded in killing some small birds with his bow and arrow, and these he roasted before a fire at night. In this way he sustained himself until he came to a river that separated his wife and friends from him. He stood upon the bank and gave that peculiar whoop, which is a signal of the return of a friend. The sound was immediately heard, and a canoe was dispatched to bring him over, and in a short time, amidst the shouts of his friends and relations who thronged from every side to see the arrival, the warrior chief was landed. When the first wild bursts of wonder and joy had subsided, and some degree of quiet had been restored to the village, he related to his people the account of his adventures. He concluded his narrative by telling them that it is pleasing to the spirit of a deceased person to have a fire built upon the grave for 4 nights after his burial, that it is 4 days' journey to the land appointed for the residence of the spirits, that in its journey thither the spirit stands in need of a fire every night at the place of its encampment, and that if the friends kindle this fire upon the spot where the body is laid, The spirit has the benefit of its light and warmth on its path, while if the friends neglect to do this, the spirit is subjected to the irksome task of making its own fire each night. End of section 11.
Section 12 of Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ladybird D. Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. The Legend of Onawuta-Kuto. A long time ago, there lived an aged Ojibwa and his wife on the shores of Lake Huron. They had an only son, a very beautiful boy named Onawuta-Kuto, or He that Catches the Clouds. The family were of the totem of the beaver. The parents were very proud of their son, and wished to make him a celebrated man, but when he reached the proper age, he would not submit to the wikundawin, or fast. When this time arrived, they gave him charcoal instead of his breakfast, but he would not blacken his face. If they denied him food, he sought birds' eggs along the shore, or picked up the heads of fish that had been cast away, and broiled them. One day, they took away violently the food he had prepared, and cast him some coals in place of it. This act decided him. He took the coals and blackened his face, and went out of the lodge. He did not return, but lay down without to sleep. As he lay, a very beautiful girl came down from the clouds, and stood by his side. "Onawuta-Kuto," she said, "I am come for you. Follow in my footsteps." The young man rose and did as he was bid. Presently he found himself ascending above the tops of the trees, and gradually he mounted up, step by step, into the air and through the clouds. At length his guide led him through an opening, and he found himself standing with her on a beautiful plain. A path led to a splendid lodge, into which Onawuta-Kuto followed his guide. It was large and divided into two parts. At one end he saw bows and arrows, clubs and spears, and various warlike instruments tipped with silver. At the other end were things exclusively belonging to women. This was the house of his fair guide, and he saw that she had on a frame a broad rich belt of many colours that she was weaving. "My brother is coming," she said, "and I must hide you." Putting him in one corner, she spread the belt over him, and presently the brother came in, very richly dressed, and shining as if he had points of silver all over him. He took down from the wall a splendid pipe, and a bag in which was abacazigan, a smoking mixture. When he had finished smoking, he laid his pipe aside, and said to his sister, "Nemesa, elder sister, when will you quit these practices? Do you forget that the greatest of the spirits has commanded that you shall not take away the children from below? Perhaps you think you have concealed Onawuta-Kuto, but do I not know of his coming? If you would not offend me, send him back at once." These words did not, however, alter his sister's purpose. She would not send him back, and her brother, finding that she was determined, called Onawuta-Kuto from his hiding-place. "Come out of your concealment," said he, "and walk about and amuse yourself. You will grow hungry if you remain there." At these words, Onawuta-Kuto came forth under the belt, and the brother presented a bow and arrows with a pipe of red stone, richly ornamented, to him. In this way, he gave his consent to Onawuta-Kuto's marriage with his sister, and from that time, the youth and the girl became husband and wife. Onawuta-Kuto found everything exceedingly fair and beautiful around him, but he found no other people besides his wife and her brother. There were flowers on the plains, there were bright and sparkling streams, there were green valleys and pleasant trees, there were gay birds and beautiful animals, very different from those he had been accustomed to. There was also day and night, as on the earth, but he observed that every morning the brother regularly left the lodge and remained absent all day, and every evening his sister departed, but generally for only a part of the night. Onawutakuta was curious to solve this mystery and obtained the brother's consent to accompany him in one of his daily journeys. They travelled over a smooth plain which seemed to stretch to illimitable distances all around. At length, Onawutakuta felt the gnawings of hunger and asked his companion if there was no game about. "Patience, my brother," replied he. "We shall soon reach the spot where I eat my dinner, and you will then see how I am provided." After walking on a long time, they came to a place where several fine mats were spread, and there they sat down to refresh themselves. At this place there was a hole in the sky, and Onawutakuta, at his companion's request, looked through it down upon the earth. He saw below the great lakes and the villages of the Indians. In one place he saw a war party stealing on the camp of their enemies. In another he saw feasting and dancing. On a green plain some young men were playing at ball, and along the banks of a stream were women employed in gathering the apukwa for mats. "Do you see," asked the brother, "that group of children playing beside a lodge? Observe that beautiful and active lad," said he, at the same time darting something from his hand. The child immediately fell on the ground and was carried by his companions into the lodge. Onawutakuta and his companion watched and saw the people below gathering about the lodge. They listened to the shishi guau of the meter, to the song he sang asking that the child's life might be spared. To this request, Onawutakuta's companion made answer, "Send me up the sacrifice of a white dog." A feast was immediately ordered by the parents of the child. The white dog was killed, his carcass was roasted, all the wise men and medicine men of the village assembling to witness the ceremony. "There are many below," said Onawutakuta's companion, "whom you call great in medical skill. They are so because their ears are open, and they are able to succeed because when I call, they hear my voice. When I have struck one with sickness, they direct the people to look to me, and when they make me the offering I ask, I remove my hand from off the sick person, and he becomes well." While he was saying this, the feast below had been served. Then the master of the feast said, "We send this to thee, great Manito," and immediately the roasted animal came up. Thus Onawutakuta and his companion got their dinner, and after they had eaten, they returned to the lodge by a different path. In this manner they lived for some time, but at last the youth got weary of the life. He thought of his friends and wished to go back to them. He could not forget his native village and his father's lodge, and he asked his wife's permission to return. After some persuasion, she consented. "Since you are better pleased," she said, "with the cares and ills and poverty of the world than with the peaceful delights of the sky and its boundless prairies, go, I give you my permission, and since I have brought you hither, I will conduct you back. Remember, however, that you are still my husband. I hold a chain in my hand by which I can, whenever I will, draw you back to me. My power over you will be in no way diminished. Beware, therefore, how you venture to take a wife among the people below. Should you ever do so, you will feel what a grievous thing it is to arouse my anger." As she uttered these words, her eyes sparkled, and she drew herself up with a majestic air. In the same moment, Onawutakuta awoke. He found himself on the ground, near his father's lodge, on the very spot where he had thrown himself down to sleep. Instead of the brighter beings of a higher world, he found around him his parents and their friends. His mother told him that he had been absent a year. For some time, Onawutakuta remained gloomy and silent, but by degrees he recovered his spirits, and he began to doubt the reality of all he had seen and heard above. At last, he even ventured to marry a beautiful girl of his own tribe. But within 4 days, she died. Still he was forgetful of his first wife's command, and he married again. Then, one night, he left his lodge, to which he never returned. His wife, it is believed, recalled him to the sky, where he still dwells, walking the vast plains. End of section 12.
Section 13 of Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Shrimpfish. Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. Manabozho in the fish's stomach. One day, Manabozho said to his grandmother, "Noko, get cedar bark and make me a line whilst I make a canoe." When all was ready, he went out to the middle of the lake a-fishing. "Meshe na magwai, kingfish," said he, letting down his line. "Take hold of my bait." He kept repeating these words some time. At last the kingfish said, "What a trouble Manabozho is! Here, trout, take hold of his line." The trout did as he was bid, and Manabozho drew up his line, the trout's weight being so great that the canoe was nearly overturned. Till he saw the trout, Manabozho kept crying out, "Wah-hee-hee! Wah-hee-hee!" As soon as he saw him, he said, "Why did you take hold of my hook? Issa, issa, shame, shame, you ugly fish!" The trout, being thus rebuked, let go. Manabozho let down his line again into the water, saying, "Kingfish, take hold of my line." "What a trouble Manabozho is!" cried the kingfish. "Sunfish, take hold of his line." The sunfish did as he was bid, and Manabozho drew him up, crying as he did so, "Wah-hee-hee! Wah-hee-hee!" while the canoe turned in swift circles. When he saw the sunfish, he cried, "Issa, issa, you odious fish! Why did you dirty my hook by taking it in your mouth? Let's go, I say, let's go!" The sunfish did as he was bid, and on his return to the bottom of the lake told the kingfish what Manabozho had said. Just then the bait was let down again near to the king, and Manabozho was heard crying out, "Meshe na magwai, take hold of my hook." The kingfish did so, and allowed himself to be dragged to the surface, which he had no sooner reached than he swallowed Manabozho and his canoe at one gulp. When Manabozho came to himself, he found he was in his canoe in the fish's stomach. He now began to think how he should escape. Looking about him, he saw his war club in his canoe, and with it he immediately struck the heart of the fish. Then he felt as though the fish was moving with great velocity. The kingfish observed to his friends, "I feel very unwell for having swallowed that nasty fellow Manabozho." At that moment he received another, more severe blow on the heart. Manabozho thought, "If I am thrown up in the middle of the lake, I shall be drowned, so I must prevent it." So he drew his canoe and placed it across the fish's throat, and just as he had finished doing this, the kingfish tried to cast him out. Manabozho now found that he had a companion with him. This was a squirrel that had been in his canoe. The squirrel helped him to place the canoe in the proper position, and Manabozho, being grateful to it, said, "For the future you shall be called Ajidaneo, Animal Tail." Then he recommenced his attack on the kingfish's heart, and by repeated blows he at last succeeded in killing him. He could tell that he had effected this by the stoppage of the fish's motion, and he could also hear the body beating against the shore. Manabozho waited a day to see what would happen. Then he heard birds scratching on the body, and all at once the rays of light broke in. He could now see the heads of the gulls, which were looking in at the opening they had made. "Oh!" cried Manabozho, "my younger brothers, make the opening larger so that I can get out." The gulls then told one another that Manabozho was inside the fish, and, setting to work at once to enlarge the hole, they, in a short time, set him free. After he got out, Manabozho said to the gulls, "For the future you shall be called Kayoshk, noble scratchers, for your kindness to me." End of section 13.
Section 14 of Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by LibriVox53. Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. The Sun and the Moon. There were once 10 brothers who hunted together, and at night they occupied the same lodge. One day, after they had been hunting, coming home they found sitting inside the lodge, near the door, a beautiful woman. She appeared to be a stranger, and was so lovely that all the hunters loved her. And as she could only be the wife of one, they agreed that he should have her who was most successful in the next day's hunt. Accordingly, the next day, they each took different ways and hunted till the sun went down. When they met at the lodge, 9 of the hunters had found nothing, but the youngest brought home a deer, so the woman was given to him for his wife. The hunter had not been married more than a year when he was seized with sickness and died. Then the next brother took the girl for his wife. Shortly after he died also, and the woman married the next brother. In a short time all the brothers died save the eldest, and he married the girl. She did not, however, love him, for he was of a churlish disposition, and one day it came into the woman's head that she would leave him and see what fortune she would meet with in the world. So she went, taking only a dog with her, and travelled all day. She went on and on. But towards evening she heard someone coming after her, who, she imagined, must be her husband. In great fear she knew not which way to turn, when she perceived a hole in the ground before her. There she thought she might hide herself, and entering it with her dog, she suddenly found herself going lower and lower, until she passed through the earth and came up on the other side. Near to her there was a lake, and a man fishing in it. "My grandfather," cried the woman, "I am pursued by a spirit." "Leave me," cried Manabozho, for it was he. "Leave me, let me be quiet." The woman still begged him to protect her, and Manabozho at length said, "Go that way, and you shall be safe." Hardly had she disappeared when the husband, who had discovered the hole by which his wife had descended, came on the scene. "Tell me," said he to Manabozho, "where has the woman gone?" "Leave me," cried Manabozho. "Don't trouble me." "Tell me," said the man, "where is the woman?" Manabozho was silent, and the husband, at last getting angry, abused him with all his might. "The woman went that way," said Manabozho at last. "Run after her, but you shall never catch her. And you shall be called Giziguki, Day Sun, and the woman shall be called Tibik Gizis, Night Sun." So the man went on running after his wife to the west, but he has never caught her, and he pursues her to this day. End of section 14. Section 15 of Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by LibriVox53. Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. The Snail and the Beaver. The father of the Osage Nation was a snail. It was when the earth was young and little. It was before the rivers had become wide or long, or the mountains lifted their peaks above the clouds, that the snail found himself passing a quiet existence on the banks of the river Missouri. His wants and wishes were but few, and well supplied, and he was happy. At length the region of the Missouri was visited by one of those great storms which so often scatter desolation over it, and the river, swollen by the melted snow and ice from the mountains, swept away everything from its banks, and among other things the drowsy snail. Upon a log he drifted down many a day's journey, till the river subsiding left him and his log upon the banks of the river of fish. He was left in the slime, and the hot sun beamed fiercely upon him, till he became baked to the earth and found himself incapable of moving. Gradually he grew in size and stature, and his form experienced a new change, till at length what was once a snail creeping on the earth ripened into man, erect, tall, and stately. For a long time after his change to a human being he remained stupefied, not knowing what he was, or by what means to sustain life. At length recollection returned to him. He remembered that he was once a snail, and dwelt upon another river. He became animated with a wish to return to his old haunts, and accordingly directed his steps toward those parts from which he had been removed. Hunger now began to prey upon him, and bade fair to close his eyes before he should again behold his beloved haunts on the banks of the river. The beasts of the forest were many, but their speed outstripped his. The birds of the air fluttered upon sprays beyond his reach, and the fish gliding through the waves at his feet were nimbler than he and eluded his grasp. Each moment he grew weaker. The films gathered before his eyes, and in his ears there rang sounds like the whistling of winds through the woods in the month before the snows. At length, wearied and exhausted, he laid himself down upon a grassy bank. As he lay, the Great Spirit appeared to him, and asked, "Why does he who is the kernel of the snail look terrified, and why is he faint and weary?" "That I tremble," answered he, "is because I fear thy power. That I faint is because I lack food." "As regards thy trembling," answered the Great Spirit, "be composed. Art thou hungry?" "I have eaten nothing," replied the man, "since I ceased to be a snail." Upon hearing this, the Great Spirit drew from under his robe a bow and arrow, and bade the man observe what he did with it. On the topmost bough of a lofty tree sat a beautiful bird, singing and fluttering among the red leaves. He placed an arrow on the bow, and letting fly, the bird fell down upon the earth. A deer was seen afar off, browsing. Again the archer bent his bow, and the animal lay dead, food for the son of the snail. "There are victuals for you," said the spirit, "enough to last you till your strength enables you to beat up the haunts of the deer and the moose. And here is the bow and arrow." The Great Spirit also taught the man how to skin the deer, and clothed him with the skin. Having done this, and having given the beasts, fishes, and all feathered creatures to him for his food and raiment, he bade the man farewell and took his departure. Strengthened and invigorated, the man pursued his journey towards the old spot. He soon stood upon the banks of his beloved river. A few more suns and he would sit down upon the very spot where for so many seasons he had crawled on the slimy leaf, so often dragged himself lazily over the muddy pool. He had seated himself upon the bank of the river, and was meditating deeply on these things, when up crept from the water a beaver, who, addressing him, said in an angry tone, "Who are you?" "I am a snail," replied the snail man. "Who are you?" "I am head warrior of the nation of beavers," answered the other. "By what authority have you come to disturb my possession of this river, which is my dominion?" "It is not your river," replied the Wasp-Basha. "The great being who is over man and beast has given it to me." The beaver was at first incredulous, but at length convinced that what the man said was true. He invited him to accompany him to his home. The man agreed, and went with him till they came to a number of small cabins, into the largest of which the beaver conducted him. He invited the man to take food with him, and while the beaver's wife and daughter were preparing the feast, he entertained his guest with an account of his people's habits of life. Soon the wife and daughter made their appearance with the food, and sitting down, the snail man was soon at ease amongst them. He was not, however, so occupied with the banquet that he had not time to be enchanted with the beauty of the beaver's daughter. And when the visit was drawing to a close, so much was he in love that he asked the beaver to give her to him for his wife. The beaver chief consented, and the marriage was celebrated by a feast, to which all the beavers and the animals with whom they had friendly relations were invited. From this union of the snail man and the beaver maid sprang the tribe of the Osages. At least so it is related by the old men of the tribe. End of section 15.
Section 16 of Folklore and Legends, North American Indians. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Val Roth. Folklore and Legends, North American Indians. The Strange Guests. Many years ago there lived near the border of Lake Superior a noted hunter who had a wife and one child. His lodge stood in a remote part of the forest, several days' journey from that of any other person. He spent his days in hunting and his evenings in relating to his wife the incidents that had befallen him in the chase. As game was very abundant, he seldom failed to bring home in the evening an ample store of meat to last them until the succeeding evening. And while they were seated by the fire in his lodge partaking the fruits of his day's labor, he entertained his wife with conversation, or by occasionally relating those tales or enforcing those precepts which every good Indian esteems necessary for the instruction of his wife and children. Thus, far removed from all sources of disquiet, surrounded by all they deemed necessary to their comfort, and happy in one another's society, their lives passed away in cheerful solitude and sweet contentment. The breast of the hunter had never felt the compunctions of remorse, for he was a just man in all his dealings. He had never violated the laws of his tribe by encroaching upon the hunting grounds of his neighbors, by taking that which did not belong to him, or by any act calculated to displease the village chiefs or offend the Great Spirit. His chief ambition was to support his family with a sufficiency of food and skins by his own unaided exertions, and to share their happiness around his cheerful fire at night. The white men had not yet taught them that blankets and clothes were necessary to their comfort, or that guns could be used in the killing of game. The life of the Chippewa hunter peacefully glided away. One evening during the winter season, it chanced that he remained out later than usual, and his wife sat lonely in the lodge, and began to be agitated with fears lest some accident had befallen him. Darkness had already fallen. She listened attentively to hear the sound of coming footsteps, but nothing could be heard but the wind mournfully whistling around the sides of the lodge. Time passed away while she remained in this state of suspense, every moment augmenting her fears and adding to her disappointment. Suddenly she heard the sound of approaching footsteps upon the frozen surface of the snow. Not doubting that it was her husband, she quickly unfastened the loop which held, by an inner fastening, the skin door of the lodge, and throwing it open, she saw two strange women standing before it. Courtesy left the hunter's wife no time for deliberation. She invited the strangers to enter and warm themselves, thinking, from the distance to the nearest neighbors, they must have walked a considerable way. When they were entered, she invited them to remain. They seemed to be total strangers to that part of the country, and the more closely she observed them, the more curious the hunter's wife became respecting her guests. No efforts could induce them to come near the fire. They took their seats in a remote part of the lodge and drew their garments around them in such a manner as to almost completely hide their faces. They seemed shy and reserved, and when a glimpse could be had of their faces, they appeared pale even to a deathly hue. Their eyes were bright but sunken. Their cheekbones were prominent, and their persons slender and emaciated. Seeing that her guests avoided conversation as well as observation, the woman forbore to question them, and sat in silence until her husband entered. He had been led further than usual in the pursuit of game, but had returned with the carcass of a large and fat deer. The moment he entered the lodge, the mysterious women exclaimed, "Behold, what a fine and fat animal!" And they immediately ran and pulled off pieces of the whitest fat, which they ate with avidity. Such conduct appeared very strange to the hunter, but supposing the strangers had been a long time without food, he made no remark, and his wife, taking example from her husband, likewise restrained herself. On the following evening the same scene was repeated. The hunter brought home the best portions of the game he had killed, and while he was laying it down before his wife according to custom, the two strange women came quickly up, tore off large pieces of fat, and ate them with greediness. Such behavior might well have aroused the hunter's displeasure, but the deference due to strange guests induced him to pass it over in silence. Observing the parts to which the strangers were most partial, the hunter resolved the next day to anticipate their wants by cutting off and tying up a portion of the fat for each. This he did, and having placed the 2 portions of fat upon the top of his burden, as soon as he entered the lodge, he gave to each stranger the part that was hers. Still the guests appeared to be dissatisfied, and took more from the carcass lying before the wife. Except for this remarkable behavior, the conduct of the guests was unexceptional, although marked by some peculiarities. They were quiet, modest, and discreet. They maintained a cautious silence during the day, neither uttering a word nor moving from the lodge. At night they would get up, and taking those implements which were then used in breaking and preparing wood, repair to the forest. Here they would busy themselves in seeking dry branches and pieces of trees blown down by the wind. When a sufficient quantity had been gathered to last until the succeeding night, they carried it home upon their shoulders. Then, carefully putting everything in its place within the lodge, they resumed their seats and their studied silence. They were always careful to return from their labors before the dawn of day, and were never known to stay out beyond that hour. In this manner they repaid in some measure the kindness of the hunter, and relieved his wife from one of her most laborious duties. Thus nearly the whole year passed away, every day leading to some new development of character which served to endear the parties to each other. The visitors began to assume a more hale and healthy aspect. Their faces daily lost some of that deathly hue which had at first marked them, and they visibly improved in strength and threw off some of that cold reserve and forbidding austerity which had kept the hunters so long in ignorance of their true character. One evening the hunter returned very late after having spent the day in toilsome exertion, and having laid the produce of his hunt at his wife's feet, the silent women seized it and began to tear off the fat in such an unceremonious manner that the wife could no longer control her feelings of disgust, and said to herself, "This is really too bad. How can I bear it any longer?" She did not, however, put her thought into words, but an immediate change was observed in the 2 visitors. They became unusually reserved, and showed evident signs of being uneasy in their situation. The good hunter immediately perceived this change, and fearful that they had taken offence, as soon as they had retired, demanded of his wife whether any harsh expression had escaped her lips during the day. She replied she had uttered nothing to give the least offence. The hunter tried to compose himself to sleep, but he felt restive and uneasy, for he could hear the sighs and lamentations of the 2 strangers. Every moment added to his conviction that his guests had taken some deep offence, and as he could not banish this idea from his mind, he arose, and going to the strangers, thus addressed them. "Tell me, ye women, what is it that causes you pain of mind, and makes you utter these unceasing sighs? Has my wife given you any cause of offence during the day while I was absent in the chase? My fears persuade me that in some unguarded moment she has forgotten what is due to the rights of hospitality, and used expressions ill befitting of the mysterious character you sustain. Tell me, ye strangers from a strange country, ye women who appear not to be of this world, What is it that causes you pain of mind and makes you utter these unceasing sighs?" They replied that no unkind expression had ever been used toward them during their residence in the lodge, that they had received all the affectionate attention they could reasonably expect. "It is not for ourselves," they continued, "it is not for ourselves that we weep. We are weeping for the fate of mankind. We are weeping for the fate of mortals whom death awaits at every stage of their existence, proud mortals whom disease attacks in youth and in age, vain men whom hunger pinches, cold benumbs, and poverty emaciates, weak beings who are born in tears, who are nurtured in tears, and whose whole course is marked upon the thirsty sands of life in a broad line of tears. It is for these we weep. You have spoken truly, brother. We are not of this world. We are spirits from the land of the dead, sent upon the earth to try the sincerity of the living. It is not for the dead, but for the living that we mourn. It was by no means necessary that your wife should express her thoughts to us. We knew them as soon as they were formed. We saw that for once displeasure had arisen in her heart. It is enough. Our mission is ended. We came but to try you, and we knew before you came that you were a kind husband, an affectionate father, and a good friend. Still, you have the weaknesses of a mortal, and your wife is in wanting in our eyes. But it is not alone for you we weep. It is for the fate of mankind." Often, very often has the widower exclaimed, "O death, how cruel, how relentless thou art to take away my beloved friend in the spring of her youth, in the pride of her strength, and in the bloom of her beauty. If thou wilt permit her once more to return to my abode, my gratitude will never cease. I will raise up my voice continually to thank the Master of life for so excellent a boon. I will devote my time to study how I can best promote her happiness while she is permitted to remain, and our lives shall roll away like a pleasant stream through a flowing valley." Thus also has the father prayed for his son, the mother for her daughter, the wife for her husband, the sister for her brother, the lover for his mistress, the friend for his bosom companion, till the sounds of mourning and the cries of the living have pierced the very recesses of the dead. The Great Spirit has at length consented to make a trial of the sincerity of these prayers by sending us upon the earth. He has done this to see how we should be received, coming as strangers, no one knowing from where. 3 moons were allotted to us to make the trial, and if, during that time, no impatience had been evinced, no angry passions excited at the place where we took up our abode, all these in the land of spirits, whom their relatives had desired to return, would have been restored. More than 2 moons have already passed, and as soon as the leaves began to bud, our mission would have been successfully terminated. It is now too late. Our trial is finished, and we are called to the pleasant fields whence we came. Brother, it is proper that one man should die to make room for another, otherwise the world would be filled to overflowing. It is just that the goods gathered by one should be left to be divided among others, for in the land of spirits there is no want, there is neither sorrow nor hunger, pain nor death. Pleasant fields filled with game spread before the eye, with birds of beautiful form, and every hill is crowned with groves of fruit trees, sweet and pleasant to the taste. It is not here, brother, but there that men begin truly to live. It is not for those who rejoice in those pleasant groves, but for you that are left behind that we weep. Brother, take our thanks for your hospitable treatment. Regret not our departure, fear not evil. Thy luck shall still be good in the chase, and there shall ever be a bright sky over thy lodge. Mourn not for us, for no corn will spring up from tears." The spirits ceased, but the hunter had no power over his voice to reply. As they had proceeded in their address, he saw the light gradually beaming from their faces, and a blue vapor filled the lodge with an unnatural light. As soon as they ceased, darkness gradually closed around. The hunter listened, but the sobs of the spirits had ceased. He heard the door of the tent open and shut, but he never saw more of his mysterious visitors. The success promised him was his. He became a celebrated hunter and never wanted for anything necessary to his ease. He became the father of many boys, all of whom grew up to manhood and health. Peace and long life were the rewards of his hospitality. End of section 16.
Section 17 of Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Shrimpfish. Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. Manabozho and his Toe. Manabozho was so powerful that he began to think there was nothing he could not do. Very wonderful were many of his feats, and he grew more conceited day by day. Now it chanced that one day he was walking about amusing himself by exercising his extraordinary powers, and at length he came to an encampment where one of the first things he noticed was a child lying in the sunshine, curled up with its toe in its mouth. Manabozho looked at the child for some time and wondered at its extraordinary posture. "I've never seen a child before lie like that," said he to himself, "but I could lie like it." So saying, he put himself down beside the child, and, taking his right foot in his hand, drew it towards his mouth. When he had brought it as near as he could, it was yet a considerable distance away from his lips. "I will try the left foot," said Manabozho. He did so, and found that he was no better off. Neither of his feet could he get to his mouth. He curled and twisted, and bent his large limbs, and gnashed his teeth in rage, to find that he could not get his toe to his mouth. All, however, was vain. At length he rose, worn out with his exertions and passion, and walked slowly away in a very ill humour, which was not lessened by the sound of the child's laughter, for Manabozho's efforts had awakened it. "Ah, ah!" said Manabozho. "Shall I be mocked by a child?" He did not, however, revenge himself on his victor, but on his way homeward, meeting a boy who did not treat him with proper respect, he transformed him into a cedar tree. "At least," said Manabozho, "I can do something." End of section 17. Section 18 of Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Shrimpfish. Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. The Girl Who Became a Bird. The father of Ranchewaimi, the flying pigeon of the Wisconsin, would not hear of her wedding Waiyonaisa, the young chief who had long sought her in marriage. The maiden, however, true to her plighted faith, still continued to meet him every evening upon one of the tufted islets which stud the river in great profusion. Nightly, through the long months of summer, did the lovers keep their tryst, parting only after each meeting more and more endeared to each other. At length Waiyonaisa was ordered off upon a secret expedition against the Sioux, and so sudden was his departure that he had no opportunity of bidding farewell to his betrothed. The band of warriors to which he was attached was a long while absent, and one day there came the news that Waiyonaisa had fallen in a fight with the Menomones. Ranchewaimi was inconsolable, but she dared not show her grief before her parents, and the only relief she could find from her sorrow was to swim over by starlight to the island where she had been accustomed to meet her lover, and there, calling upon his name, bewail the loss of him who was dearer to her than all else. One night, while she was engaged in this lamentation, the sound of her voice attracted some of her father's people to the spot. Startled by their appearance, the girl tried to climb a tree in order to hide herself in its branches, but her frame was bowed with sorrow, and her weak limbs refused to aid her. "Waio Naisa!" she cried. "Waio Naisa!" At each repetition of his name her voice became shriller, while, as she endeavored to screen herself in the underwood, a soft plumage began to cover her delicate limbs, which were wounded by the briars. She tossed her arms to the sky in her distress, and they became clothed with feathers. At length, when her pursuers were close upon her, a bird arose from the bush they had surrounded, and flitting from tree to tree, it fled before them, ever crying, "Waio Naisa! Waio Naisa!" End of section 18. Section 19 of Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Shrimpfish. Folklore and Legends, North American Indian, The Undying Head. In a remote part of the North lived a man and his only sister, who had never seen human being. Seldom, if ever, had the man any cause to go from home, for if he wanted food he had only to go a little distance from the lodge, and there place his arrows with their barbs in the ground. He would then return to the lodge and tell his sister where the arrows had been placed, where she would go in search of them, and never fail to find each struck through the heart of a deer. These she dragged to the lodge and dressed for food. Thus she lived until she attained womanhood. One day her brother, who was named Iamo, said to her, "Sister, the time is near when you will be ill. Listen to my advice, for if you do not, it will probably be the cause of my death. Take the implements from which we kindle our fires. Go some distance from our lodge and build a separate fire. When you are in want of food, I will tell you where to find it. You must cook for yourself, and I for myself. When you are ill, do not attempt to come near the lodge, or bring to it any of the utensils you use. Be sure to always have fastened to your belt whatever you will need in your sickness, for you do not know when the time of your indisposition will come. As for myself, I must do the best I can." His sister promised to obey him in all he said. Shortly after her brother had cause to go from home, his sister was alone in the lodge combing her hair, and she had just untied and laid aside the belt to which the implements were fastened, when suddenly she felt unwell. She ran out of the lodge, but in her haste forgot the belt. Afraid to return, she stood some time thinking, and finally she determined to return to the lodge and get it, for she said to herself, "My brother is not at home, and I will stay but a moment to catch hold of it." She went back, and running in, suddenly seized the belt, and was coming out when her brother met her. He knew what had happened. "Did I not tell you," said he, "to take care? Now you have killed me." His sister would have gone away, but he spoke to her again. "What can you do now? What I feared has happened. Go in and stay where you have always lived. You have killed me." He then laid aside his hunting dress and accoutrements, and soon after both his feet began to inflame and turn black, so that he could not move. He directed his sister where to place his arrows, so that she might always have food. The inflammation continued to increase, and had now reached his first rib. "Sister," said he, "my end is near. You must do as I tell you. You see my medicine sack and my war club tied to it. It contains all my medicines, my war plumes, and my paints of all colors. As soon as the inflammation reaches my chest, you will take my war club, and, with the sharp point of it, cut off my head. When it is free from my body, take it. Place its neck in the sack, which you must open at one end. Then hang it up in its former place. Do not forget my bow and arrows. One of the last you will take to procure food. Tie the others to my sack, and then hang it up so that I can look towards the door. Now and then I will speak to you, but not often." His sister again promised to obey. In a little time his chest became affected.
"Now," cried he, "take the club and strike off my head." His sister was afraid, but he told her to muster up courage. "Strike," said he, with a smile upon his face. Calling up all her courage, his sister struck and cut off the head. "Now," said the head, "place me where I told you." Fearful, she obeyed it in all its commands. Retaining its animation, it looked round the lodge as usual, and it would command its sister to go to such places where it thought she could best procure the flesh of the different animals she needed. One day the head said, "The time is not distant when I shall be freed from this situation, but I shall have to undergo many sore evils. So the superior Manito decrees, and I must bear all patiently." In a certain part of the country was a village inhabited by a numerous and warlike band of Indians. In this village was a family of 10 young men, brothers. In the spring of the year the youngest of these blackened his face and fasted. His dreams were propitious, and having ended his fast he sent secretly for his brothers at night, so that the people in the village should not be aware of their meeting. He told them how favorable his dreams had been, and that he had called them together to ask them if they would accompany him in a war excursion. They all answered they would. The third son, noted for his oddities, swinging his war club when his brother had ceased speaking, jumped up. "Yes," said he, "I will go, and this will be the way I will treat those we go to fight with." With those words he struck the post in the center of the lodge and gave a yell. The other brothers spoke to him, saying, "Gently, gently, Mudjekeewis, when you are in other people's lodges." So he sat down. Then in return they took the drum, sang their songs, and closed the meeting with a feast. The youngest told them not to whisper their intention to their wives, but to prepare secretly for their journey. They all promised obedience, and Mudjekeewis was the first to do so. The time for departure drew near. The youngest gave the word for them to assemble on a certain night, when they would commence their journey. Mudjekeewis was loud in his demands for his moccasins, and his wife several times demanded the reason of his impatience. "Besides," said she, "you have a good pair on." "Quick, quick!" replied Mudjekeewis, "since you must know we are going on a war excursion." Thus he revealed the secret. That night they met and started. The snow was on the ground, and they traveled all night lest others should follow them. When it was daylight the leader took snow, made a ball of it, and tossing it up in the air, said, "It was in this way I saw snow fall in my dream, so that we could not be tracked." Immediately snow began to fall in large flakes, so that the leader commanded the brothers to keep close together for fear of losing one another. Close as they walked together, it was with difficulty they could see one another. The snow continued falling all that day and the next night, so that it was impossible for anyone to follow their track. They walked for several days, and Mudjekeewis was always in the rear. One day, running suddenly forward, he gave the "Saw-saw-quan" war cry, and struck a tree with his war club, breaking the tree in pieces as if it had been struck by lightning. "Brothers," said he, "this is the way I will serve those we are going to fight." The leader answered, "Slowly, slowly, Mudjekeewis. The one I lead you to is not to be thought of so lightly." Again Mudjekeewis fell back and thought to himself, What? Who can this be he is leading us to?" He felt fearful, and was silent. Day after day they traveled on till they came to an extensive plain, on the borders of which human bones were bleaching in the sun. The leaders said, "These are the bones of those who have gone before us. None has ever yet returned to tell the sad tale of their fate." Again Mudjekeewis became restless, and, running forward, gave the accustomed yell. Advancing to a large rock which stood above the ground, he struck it, and it fell to pieces. "See, brothers," said he, "thus will I treat those we are going to fight." "Be quiet," said the leader. "He to whom I am leading you is not to be compared to that rock." Mudjekeewis fell back quite thoughtful, saying to himself, "I wonder who this can be that he is going to attack." And he was afraid. They continued to see the remains of former warriors who had been to the place to which they were now going, and had retreated thus far back again. At last they came to a piece of rising ground, from which they plainly saw on a distant mountain an enormous bear. The distance between them was very great, but the size of the animal caused it to be seen very clearly. "There," said the leader, "it is to him I am leading you. Here our troubles will only commence, for he is a Mishkemokwa, a she-bear, or a male bear as ferocious as a she-bear, and a Manito. It is he who has what we prize so dearly, to obtain which the warriors whose bones we saw sacrifice their lives. You must not be fearful. Be manly. We shall find him asleep." The warriors advanced boldly till they came near to the bear. When they stopped to look at it more closely, it was asleep, and there was a belt around its neck. "This," said the leader, touching the belt, "is what we must get. It contains what we want." The eldest brother then tried to slip the belt over the bear's head, the animal appearing to be fast asleep, and not at all disturbed by his efforts. He could not, however, remove the belt, nor was any of the brothers more successful, till the one next to the youngest tried in his turn. He slipped the belt nearly over the beast's head, but could not get it quite off. Then the youngest laid his hands on it, and with a pull succeeded. Placing the belt on the eldest brother's back, he said, "Now we must run," and they started off at their best pace. When one became tired with the weight of the belt, another carried it. Thus they ran till they had passed the bones of all the warriors, and when they were some distance beyond, looking back, they saw the monster slowly rising. For some time it stood still, not missing the belt. Then they heard a tremendous howl, like distant thunder, slowly filling the sky. At last they heard the bear cry, "Who can it be that has dared to steal my belt? Earth is not so large but I can find them." And it descended the hill in pursuit. With every jump of the bear, the earth shook as if it were convulsed. Very soon it approached the party. They, however, kept the belt, exchanging it from one to another and encouraging each other. The bear, however, gained on them fast. "Brothers," said the leader, "have none of you, in fasting, ever dreamed of some friendly spirit who would aid you as a guardian?" A dead silence followed. "Well," continued he, "once when I was fasting I dreamed of being in danger of instant death, when I saw a small lodge, with smoke curling up from its top. An old man lived in it, and I dreamed that he helped me, and may my dream be verified soon." Having said this, he ran forward and gave a yell and howl. They came upon a piece of rising ground, and, behold! a lodge with smoke curling from its top appeared before them. This gave them all new strength, and they ran forward and entered the lodge. In it they found an old man, to whom the leader said, "Nemesho," my grandfather, "help us. We ask your protection, for the great bear would kill us." "Sit down and eat, my grandchildren," said the old man. "Who is a great Manito? There is none but me. But let me look." And he opened the door of the lodge, and saw at a little distance the enraged bear coming on with slow but great leaps. The old man closed the door. "Yes," said he is indeed a great Manito. My grandchildren, you will be the cause of my losing my life. You asked my protection, and I granted it. So now, come what may, I will protect you. When the bear arrives at the door, you must run out at the other end of the lodge." Putting his hand to the side of the lodge where he sat, he took down a bag, and, opening it, took out of it 2 small black dogs, which he placed before him. "These are the ones I use when I fight," said he, and he commenced patting with both hands the sides of one of the dogs, which at once commenced to swell out until it filled the lodge, and it had great strong teeth. When the dog had attained its full size, it growled, and, springing out at the door, met the bear, which, in another leap, would have reached the lodge. A terrible combat ensued. The sky rang with the howls of the monsters. In a little while the second dog took the field. At the commencement of the battle, the brothers, acting on the advice of the old man, escaped through the opposite side of the lodge. They had not proceeded far in their flight before they heard the death cry of one of the dogs, and soon after that of the other. "Well," said the leader, "the old man will soon share their fate, so run, run! The bear will soon be after us." The brothers started with fresh vigor, for the old man had refreshed them with food, but the bear very soon came in sight again, and was evidently fast gaining upon them. Again the leader asked the warriors if they knew of any way in which to save themselves. All were silent. Running forward with a yell and a howl, the leader said, "I dreamed once that, being in great trouble, an old man who was a Manito helped me. We shall soon see his lodge." Taking courage, the brothers still went on, and after going a short distance they saw a lodge. Entering it, they found an old man, whose protection they claimed, saying that a Manito was pursuing them. "Eat," said the old man, putting meat before them. "Who is a Manito? There's no Manito but me. There is none whom I fear." Then he felt the earth tremble as the bear approached, and, opening the door of the lodge, he saw it coming. The old man shut the door slowly and said, "Yes, my grandchildren, you have brought trouble upon me." Taking his medicine sack, he took out some small war clubs of black stone, and told the young men to run through the other side of the lodge. As he handled the clubs, they became an enormous size, and the old man stepped out as the bear reached the door. He struck the beast with one of his clubs, which broke in pieces, and the bear stumbled. The old man struck it again with the other club, and that also broke, but the bear fell insensible. Each blow the old man struck sounded like a clap of thunder, and the howls of the bear ran along the skies. The brothers had gone some distance before they looked back. They then saw that the bear was recovering from the blows. First it moved its paws, and then they saw it rise to its feet. The old man shared the fate of the first, for the warriors heard his cries as he was torn in pieces. Again the monster was in pursuit, and fast overtaking them. Not yet discouraged, the young men kept on their way, but the bear was so close to them that the leader once more applied to his brothers, but they could do nothing. "Well," said he, "my dreams will soon be exhausted. After this I have but one more." He advanced, invoking his guardian spirit to aid him. "Once," said he, "I dreamed that, being sorely pressed, I came to a large lake, on the shore of which was a canoe, partly out of water, and having 10 paddles all in readiness. 'Do not fear,' he cried, 'we shall soon get to it.' It happened as he had said. Coming to the lake, the warriors found the canoe with the 10 paddles, and immediately took their places in it. Putting off, they paddled to the center of the lake, when they saw the bear on the shore. Lifting itself on its hind legs, it looked all around. Then it waded into the water until, losing its footing, it turned back, and commenced making the circuit of the lake. Meanwhile the warriors remained stationary in the center, watching the animal's movements. It traveled round till it came to the place whence it started. Then it commenced streaking up the water, and the young men saw a strong current fast setting in towards the bear's mouth. The leader encouraged them to paddle hard for the opposite shore. This they had nearly reached when the current became too strong for them, and they were drawn back by it, and the stream carried them onwards to the bear. Then the leader again spoke, telling his comrades to meet their fate bravely. "Now is the time, Mudjekeewis," said he, "to show your prowess. Take courage and sit in the bow of the canoe, and, when it approaches the bear's mouth, try what effect your club will have on the beast's head." Mudjekeewis obeyed, and, taking his place, stood ready to give the blow, while the leader, who steered, directed the canoe to the open mouth of the monster. Rapidly advancing, the canoe was just about to enter the beast's mouth, when Mudjekeewis struck the beast a tremendous blow on the head, and gave it the saw quan. The bear's limbs doubled under it, and it fell stunned by the blow. But before Mudjekeewis could strike again, the monster sent from its mouth all the water it had swallowed with such force that the canoe was immediately carried by the stream to the other side of the lake. Leaving the canoe, the brothers fled, and on they went till they were completely exhausted. Again they felt the earth shake, and, looking back, saw the monster hard after them. The young men's spirits drooped, and they felt faint-hearted. With words and actions the leader exerted himself to cheer them, and once more he asked them if they could do nothing, or think of nothing that might save them. All were silent as before. "Then," said he, "this is the last time I can apply to my guardian spirit. If we do not now succeed, our fate is decided." He ran forward, invoking his spirit with great earnestness, and gave the yell. "We shall soon arrive," said he to his brothers, "at the place where my last guardian spirit dwells. In him I place great confidence. Do not be afraid, or your limbs will be fear-bound. We shall soon reach his lodge. Run, run!" What had in the meantime passed in the lodge of Iamo? He had remained in the same condition, his head in the sack, directing his sister where to place the arrows to procure food, and speaking at long intervals. One day the girl saw the eyes of the head brighten as if with pleasure. At last it spoke. "Oh, sister," it said, "in what a pitiful situation you have been the cause of placing me. Soon, very soon, a band of young men will arrive and apply to me for aid, but alas, how can I give them what I would with so much pleasure have afforded them? Nevertheless, take 2 arrows and place them where you have been in the habit of placing the others, and have meat cooked and prepared before they arrive. When you hear them coming and calling on my name, go out and say, 'Alas, it is long ago since an accident befell him. I was the cause of it.' If they still come near, ask them in, and set meat before them. Follow my directions strictly. A bear will come. Go out and meet him, taking my medicine sack, bow and arrows, and my head. You must then untie the sack and spread out before you my paints of all colors, my war-eagle feathers, my tufts of dried hair, and whatsoever else the sack contains. As the bear approaches, take these articles one by one, and say to him, 'This is my dead brother's paint,' and so on with all the articles, throwing each of them as far from you as you can. The virtue contained in the things will cause him to totter. Then, to complete his destruction, you must take my head, and cast it as far off as you can, crying aloud, 'See, this is my dead brother's head.' He will then fall senseless. While this is taking place the young men will have eaten, and you must call them to your aid. You will, with their assistance, cut the carcass of the bear into pieces, into small pieces, and scatter them to the winds, for unless you do this he will again come to life." The sister promised that all should be done as he commanded, and she had only time to prepare the meal when the voice of the leader of the band of warriors was heard calling on Iamo for aid. The girl went out and did as she had been directed. She invited the brothers in and placed meat before them, and while they were eating the bear was heard approaching. Untying the medicine sack and taking the head, the girl made all ready for its approach. When it came up she did as her brother directed, and before she had cast down all the paints the bear began to totter, but still advancing came close to her. Then she took the head and cast it from her as far as she could, and as it rolled upon the ground the bear, tottering, fell with a tremendous noise. The girl cried for help, and the young men rushed out. Mudjekeewis, stepping up, gave a yell, and struck the bear a blow on the head. This he repeated till he had dashed out its brains. Then the others, as quickly as possible, cut the monster up into very small pieces, and scattered them in all directions. As they were engaged in this, they were surprised to find that, wherever the flesh was thrown, small black bears appeared, such as are seen at the present day, which, starting up, ran away. Thus, from this monster the present race of bears derives its origin. Having overcome their pursuer, the brothers returned to the lodge, and the girl gathered together the articles she had used, and placed the head in the sack again. The head remained silent, probably from its being fatigued with its exertion in overcoming the bear. Having spent so much time, and having traversed so vast a country in their flight, the young men gave up the idea of ever returning to their own country, and, game being plentiful about the lodge, they determined to remain where they were. One day they moved off some distance from the lodge for the purpose of hunting, and left the belt with the girl. They were very successful, and amused themselves with talking and jesting. One of them said, "We have all this sport to ourselves. Let us go and ask our sister if she will not let us bring the head to this place, for it is still alive." So they went and asked for the head. The girl told them to take it, and they carried it to their hunting grounds and tried to amuse it, but only at times did they see its eyes beam with pleasure. One day, while they were busy in their encampment, they were unexpectedly attacked by unknown enemies. The fight was long and fierce. Many of the foes were slain, but there were 30 of them to each warrior. The young men fought desperately till they were all killed, and then the attacking party retreated to a high place to muster their men and count the missing and the slain. One of the men had strayed away, and happened to come to where the head was hung up. Seeing that it was alive, he eyed it for some time with fear and surprise. Then he took it down, and, having opened the sack, he was much pleased to see the beautiful feathers, one of which he placed on his head. It waved gracefully over him as he walked to his companion's camp, and when he came there he threw down the head and sack and told his friends how he had found them, and how the sack was full of paints and feathers. The men all took the head and made sport of it. Many of the young men took the paint and painted themselves with it, and one of the band, taking the head by the hair, said, "Look, you ugly thing, and see your paints on the faces of warriors." The feathers were so beautiful that many of the young men placed them on their heads, and they again subjected the head to all kinds of indignity. They were, however, soon punished for their insulting conduct, for all who had worn the feathers became sick and died. Then the chief commanded the men to throw all the paints and feathers away. "As for the head," he said, "we will keep that and take it home with us. We will there see what we can do with it. We will try to make it shut its eyes." Meanwhile, for several days, the sister had been waiting for the brothers to bring back the head, till at last, getting impatient, she went in search of them. She found them lying within short distances of one another, dead and covered with wounds. Other bodies lay scattered around. She searched for the head and sack, but they were nowhere to be found. So she raised her voice and wept, and blackened her face. Then she walked in different directions till she came to the place whence the head had been taken. And there she found the bow and arrows which had been left behind. She searched further, hoping to find her brother's head, and, when she came to a piece of rising ground, she found some of his paints and feathers. These she carefully put by, hanging them to the branch of a tree. At dusk she came to the first lodge of a large village. Here she used a charm employed by Indians when they wished to meet with a kind reception, and on applying to the old man and woman who occupied the lodge, she was made welcome by them. She told them her errand, and the old man, promising to help her, told her that the head was hung up before the council fire, and that the chiefs and young men of the village kept watch over it continually. The girl said she only desired to see the head, and would be satisfied if she could only get to the door of the lodge in which it was hung, for she knew she could not take it by force. "Come with me," said the old man. "I will take you there." So they went and took their seats in the lodge near to the door. The council lodge was filled with warriors amusing themselves with games, and constantly keeping up the fire to smoke the head to dry it. As the girl entered the lodge, the men saw the features of the head move, and, not knowing what to make of it, one spoke and said, "Aha! It is beginning to feel the effects of the smoke." The sister looked up from the seat by the door. Her eyes met those of her brother, and tears began to roll down the cheeks of the head. "Well," said the chief, "I thought we would make you do something at last. Look at it shedding tears," said he to those around him, and they all laughed and made jokes upon it. The chief, looking around, observed the strange girl, and after some time said to the old man who brought her in, "Who have you got there? I have never seen that woman before in our village." "Yes," replied the old man, "you have seen her. She is a relation of mine, and seldom goes out. She stays in my lodge, and she asked me to bring her here." In the center of the lodge sat one of those young men who are always forward and fond of boasting and displaying themselves before others. "Why," said he, "I have seen her often, and it is to his lodge I go almost every night to court her." All the others laughed and continued their games. The young man did not know he was telling a lie to the girl's advantage, who by means of it escaped. She returned to the old man's lodge, and immediately set out for her own country. Coming to the spot where the bodies of her adopted brothers lay, she placed them together with their feet towards the east. Then taking an axe she had, she cast it up into the air, crying out, "Brothers, get up from under it, or it will fall on you!" This she repeated 3 times, and the 3rd time all the brothers rose and stood on their feet. Mudjekeewis commenced rubbing his eyes and stretching himself. "Why," said he, "I have overslept myself." "No, indeed," said one of the others. "Do you not know we were all killed, and that it is our sister who has brought us to life?" The brothers then took the bodies of their enemies and burned them. Soon after the girl went to a far country, they knew not where, to procure wives for them, and she returned with the woman, whom she gave to the young men, beginning with the eldest. Mudjekeewis stepped to and fro, uneasy lest he should not get the one he liked, but he was not disappointed, for for she fell to his lot, and the two were well matched, for she was a female magician. The young men and their wives all moved into a very large lodge, and their sister told them that one of the women must go in turns every night to try and recover the head of her brother, untying the knots by which it was hung up in the council lodge. The women all said they would go with pleasure. The eldest made the first attempt. With a rushing noise she disappeared through the air. Towards daylight she returned. She had failed, having only succeeded in untying one of the knots. All the women, save the youngest, went in turn, and each one succeeded in untying only one knot each time. At length the youngest went. As soon as she arrived at the lodge she went to work. The smoke from the fire in the lodge had not ascended for 10 nights. It now filled the place and drove all the men out. The girl was alone, and she carried off the head. The brothers and Iamo's sister heard the young woman coming high through the air, and they heard her say, "Prepare the body of our brother." As soon as they heard that, they went to where Iamo's body lay, and, having got it ready, as soon as the young woman arrived with the head, they placed it to the body, and Iamo was restored in all his former manliness and beauty. All rejoiced in the happy termination of their troubles, and when they had spent some time joyfully together, Iamo said, "Now I will divide the treasure." And taking the bear's belt, he commenced dividing what it contained amongst the brothers, beginning with the eldest. The youngest brother, however, got the most splendid part of the spoil, for the bottom of the belt held what was richest and rarest. Then Iamo told them that, since they had all died and been restored to life again, they were no longer mortals but spirits, and he assigned to each of them a station in the invisible world. Only Mujikiwas's place was, however, named. He was to direct the west wind. The brothers were commanded, as they had it in their power, to do good to the inhabitants of the earth, and to give all things with a liberal hand. The spirits then, amid songs and shouts, took their flight to their respective places, while Iamo and his sister, Iamokwa, descended into the depths below. End of section 19.
Section 20 of Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Shrimpfish. Folklore and Legends, North American Indian. The Old Chippeway. The old man Chippeway, the first of men, when he first landed on the earth, near where the present Dulgreebs have their hunting grounds, found the world a beautiful world, well stocked with food, and abounding with pleasant things. He found no man, woman, or child upon it. But, in time, being lonely, he created children, to whom he gave 2 kinds of fruit, the black and the white, but he forbade them to eat the black. Having given his commands for the government and guidance of his family, he took leave of them for a time, to go into a far country where the sun dwelt, for the purpose of bringing it to the earth. After a very long journey and a long absence, he returned, bringing with him the sun, and he was delighted to find that his children had remained obedient, and had eaten only of the white food. Again he left them to go on another expedition. The sun he had brought lighted up the earth for only a short time, and in the land from which he had brought it he had noticed another body, which served as a lamp in the dark hours. He resolved, therefore, to journey and bring back with him the moon. So, bidding adieu to his children and his dwelling, he set forth once more. While he had been absent on his first expedition, his children had eaten up all the white food, and now, when he set out, he forgot to provide them with a fresh supply. For a long time they resisted the craving for food, but at last they could hold out no longer, and satisfied their hunger with the black fruit. The old Chippeway soon returned, bringing with him the moon. He soon discovered that his children had transgressed his command, and had eaten the food of disease and death. He told them what was the consequence of their act, that in future the earth would produce bad fruits, that sickness would come amongst men, that pain would rack them, and their lives be lives of fatigue and danger. Having brought the sun and moon to the earth, the old man Chippeway rested, and made no more expeditions. He lived an immense number of years, and saw all the troubles he declared would follow the eating of the black food. At last he became tired of life, and his sole desire was to be freed from it. "Go," said he to one of his sons, "to the river of the Bear Lake, and fetch me a man of the Little Wise People, the Beavers. Let it be one with a brown ring round the end of the tail, and a white spot on the tip of the nose. Let him be just 2 seasons old upon the first day of the coming frog moon, and see that his teeth be sharp." The man did as he was directed. He went to the river of the Bear Lake, and brought a man of the Little Wise People. He had a brown ring round the end of his tail, and a white spot on the tip of his nose. He was just 2 seasons old upon the first day of the frog moon, and his teeth were very sharp. "Take the wise 4-legged man," said the old Chippeway, "and pull from his jaws 7 of his teeth." The man did as he was directed, and brought the teeth to the old man. Then he bade him call all his people together, and when they were come, the old man thus addressed them: "I am old, and am tired of life, and wish to sleep the sleep of death. I will go hence. Take the 7 teeth of the wise little 4-legged man, and drive them into my body." They did so, and as the last tooth entered him, the old man died. End of section 20.